The logging roads surrounding Pine Hollow Forest vanished into shadow the moment the sun dipped below the ridge. By dusk, the silence was total. No crickets, no rustle of small game. Just the weight of the pines pressing inward. Locals in town kept their doors bolted and their windows dark, sharing stories that never quite reached the official logs. They spoke of a deer, not one that fled at the snap of a twig, but one that lingered, watching from the periphery of the tree line. The talk was always the same. It did not graze like a beast. It moved with a strange, calculated posture that defied the anatomy of the woods. People claimed they saw it standing on two legs, balanced and still, waiting in the gaps between the trees. Skeptics laughed it off as the product of isolation and bad lighting. But those who had seen it walk did not laugh. They stopped going into the forest after sunset. They knew that when the light failed, something was waiting in the brush to test the boundaries of what was natural. The woods were quiet now, but they were not empty. Emily Torres ignored the warnings. She pulled her patrol truck to the gravel edge of the logging road and cut the engine. The silence of the forest hit her like a physical barrier, thick and unyielding. She grabbed her heavy-duty flashlight and stepped out, the gravel crunching loudly under her boots. Inside the tree line, the air felt colder, stagnant. She clicked the light on. The beam sliced through the gloom, illuminating swirling dust motes and tangled vines that seemed to reach for her ankles. Emily pushed through, her shoulders hunched against the oppressive weight of the canopy above. Every step forward made the road behind her feel miles away. She swept the light in wide arcs, searching for any sign of movement, but the woods remained stubbornly still. Branches scraped against her arms, scratching at the air. She checked her radio, but the signal was dead, replaced by a low, rhythmic static. She kept moving, deeper into the dense brush, where the light struggled to penetrate the wall of pines. She was alone, but the sensation of being observed tightened in her chest with every passing second. The beam of Emily's light hit a patch of moss, and there it was, a deer, head down, grazing among the pines. It stood roughly 20 feet away. Emily froze. She held her breath, not wanting to break the stillness of the clearing. The creature stopped chewing. It did not bolt. Instead, it shifted its weight, its front hooves digging into the soft earth. Then, with a slow and deliberate motion, it began to rise. There was no panicked scrambling, no awkward collapse. It straightened its spine, hoisting itself onto its hind legs with the fluid, calculated grace of a person standing upright. It reached its full height and remained there, perfectly balanced. Emily watched, her hand trembling, as the deer adjusted its posture to face her directly. She tilted her flashlight. The beam caught its eyes. They did not glow like a normal animal's. They flared with a cold, metallic brightness that seemed to swallow the light rather than reflect it. A sharp, primal fear spiked in her throat. The creature did not blink. It stood there, anchored to the forest floor, staring at her with an intensity that felt entirely human. Emily took a slow, deliberate step backward. The creature immediately mimicked her, sliding its hind legs across the pine needles to maintain the same distance. She tried again, moving toward the left, and it mirrored her perfectly, its upright frame swaying in total lockstep. The silence in the clearing grew heavy, broken only by the sound of her own ragged breathing. She risked a glance at the surrounding brush, looking for a break in the trees, but the dark trunks seemed to press closer together. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She took another step back, and the creature stepped forward, closing the gap she had just created. It was testing her. It was learning her rhythm. A branch snapped under her boot, and the sound echoed like a gunshot. Emily did not wait for it to move again. She spun around, her flashlight beam swinging wildly across the bark of the trees, and sprinted. She pushed through the thicket, ignoring the vines that lashed at her skin. Behind her, she heard the rhythmic, heavy thud of hooves hitting the ground not in a gallop, but in a measured, human-like stride. She pushed her legs harder, lungs burning, desperate to reach the gravel road and the safety of her truck. Emily slammed the truck door and jammed the key into the ignition, her hands shaking so violently she dropped it twice. She didn't stop until she reached the station. She threw the front door open, stumbled to the desk, and jammed the SD card into the reader. Her eyes scanned the monitors, searching for the footage from the outer perimeter. The first clip showed the creature standing by the north gate at 11:02 p.m. She clicked the next file. The same figure, in the same upright posture, appeared on the southern camera at 11:02 and 15 seconds. She froze. The distance between those 2 points was over 5 miles of dense, vertical terrain. It was physically impossible to traverse that ground in seconds, let alone on 2 legs. She pulled up the timestamps for every camera in the forest. The creature flickered across the screen like a glitch in reality appearing in the east, then the west, then the deep valley, all within moments of each other. It wasn't walking through the pines. It was repositioning itself, ignoring the constraints of space and speed. Emily pushed the monitor away, the hum of the hard drive suddenly sounding like a countdown. The woods were not just inhabited. They were being occupied by something that refused to be bound by the physical world. The station lights hummed, a thin, electrical whine that did nothing to mask the sudden, absolute silence outside. Emily sat at the desk, her fingers hovering over the radio handset, paralyzed by the data on the screen. She barely breathed, listening to the wind die down until the forest was a tomb. Then it started. A single, dull thud against the heavy oak of the front door. Tap! Emily stiffened, her gaze snapping toward the entryway. She waited, heart hammering against her ribs, expecting the wind to shift or a branch to scrape the siding. It did not. The silence returned, thicker than before. Then the sound came again, sharper this time. Tap, tap. 3 distinct, measured strikes. It was not the erratic banging of a desperate person, nor the random collision of debris. It was deliberate. Someone or something was signaling. Emily stood up, her chair scraping harshly against the floorboards, the sound echoing through the cabin like a gunshot. The tapping stopped immediately. The air in the room felt heavy, pressurized, as if the walls were leaning inward. She took a tentative step toward the door, her boots sinking into the floorboards. Outside, the darkness pressed against the glass, waiting. The rhythmic pressure was gone, replaced by a stillness so profound it felt like a held breath. Emily moved toward the window, her palms slick with sweat. She reached the frame and pressed her face against the cold glass, peering into the shadows of the porch. At first, she saw only the swaying of the pines in the distance. Then, the shadows shifted. A towering shape emerged from the gloom, rising up until it blocked the moonlight. It was the deer. It stood fully upright, its back legs locked in a rigid, human-like stance. The creature was immense, its height far exceeding the standard proportions of any animal she had ever tracked. Its antlers reached up, scraping against the wooden eaves of the porch with a slow, grinding sound that vibrated through the floorboards. She watched, unable to look away, as the deer shifted its weight. It did not move like a beast. It moved with the calculated, heavy grace of a predator. The wood of the porch groaned under its pressure. It stood there, a dark, hulking silhouette that claimed the space entirely. It was no longer a creature of the forest, but a deliberate trespasser standing at her door. Emily felt the vibration of the scraping antlers against the roof beams, a rhythmic, scratching reminder that the barrier between the woods and her home had been breached. The creature turned its head, the motion fluid and unnatural, bringing its face inches from the window glass. Emily watched, frozen, as the creature pulled its lips back. It was not a snarl, but a wide, jagged human smile that stretched too far across its muzzle, exposing teeth that looked like splintered bone. The sight shattered her remaining resolve. She did not scream. She simply turned and lunged for the back door, her boots skidding on the floorboards. She threw the bolt, the metal screeching in the quiet room, and burst out into the night air. She did not look back. She did not grab her radio. She did not reach for the keys to the truck. She sprinted toward the perimeter fence, her lungs burning with the sharp, cold mountain air. Behind her, the wood of the cabin groaned as if something heavy had just stepped onto the porch floor. She vaulted the fence, her hands tearing against the wire, and kept running until the cabin was a dark speck in the distance. She pushed through the dense brush, branches whipping her face, driven by the singular, crushing need to put miles between herself and the thing that had smiled at her. She never looked back at Pine Hollow again. 6 months of mountain winters had settled over the Pine Hollow station. The silence was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic crunch of boots on frozen gravel. The new ranger climbed the porch steps, his key turning in the lock with a sharp, metallic click. The air inside was stale, smelling of pine needles and long-settled dust. He dropped his gear bag onto the floor, the thud echoing through the cabin. Everything remained exactly as it had been left. A half-empty mug sat on the counter, a layer of gray film covering the dried dregs of coffee. A radio rested on the desk, its battery long dead, the antenna bent at an awkward angle. He crossed the room, his movements slow and methodical. He ran a hand over the desktop, leaving a clean streak in the thick accumulation of dust. He began to organize, stacking scattered files and clearing away the debris of a life abandoned in haste. The cabin felt heavy, the walls retaining a cold, dense atmosphere that refused to warm despite the sunlight streaming through the windows. He reached for a stack of papers, his fingers brushing against the wood of the desk, completely unaware of the history pressed into the grain beneath his hands. He worked in the quiet, focused on the mundane task of restoration, oblivious to the fact that he was now the sole occupant of a space that still held the echo of a scream. His fingers caught the edge of a yellowed scrap of paper wedged deep beneath the sliding drawer. He pulled it free. The paper was brittle, the ink faded but legible. He held it up to the light. The handwriting was jagged, hurried, as if written in the final moments of a desperate escape. He read the words aloud, his voice dropping into the stillness of the cabin. If you see the deer standing like a man, do not let it see you looking back. It only follows those who recognize what it truly is. He frowned, the warning sounding like the rambling of a mind frayed by isolation. He looked toward the window, ready to toss the paper aside, when the rhythm began. 3 slow, deliberate taps against the front door. He froze. The sound was heavy, resonant, as if something with great weight stood just inches away. He turned his head toward the entrance. He felt a sudden, icy pressure in the air. He realized then that his reading of the note was the recognition the creature required. A soft, scraping sound followed, the unmistakable noise of antlers brushing against the roof shingles. He did not move. He did not breathe. Outside, in the gathering dark, the deer was waiting for him to